I caught the vampire, Cryptina cried as she was holding Alaric by his arms. Just then, Danny rested his hand over his eyes to get a closer look. Hey, look! Danny pointed with excitement. She caught the vampire! Alaric looked up at them as if he was dealing with real vampire hunters. Then all the children surrounded them like flies on food. Wait! Alaric cried, trying to break free from them as the children grabbed him tightly. I have to find my parents! The children threw him under the wooden cage. Cryptina, help me! Alaric cried as tears began to fall from his eyes. Let me out, or I'm going to suck the blood out of you! Alaric tried grabbing the bars of the cage and began to shake it as if he was an angry monkey trying to break free. Cryptina slowly stepped towards him, feeling sorry. Alaric, listen. She rested her hand on his hand. I saw your mother, and she told me to keep you safe. Liar! Alaric cried as he threw her hand off his. You knew! He grabbed the bars of the cage, holding them tighter as the cage bars began to crack. I did, and I'm sorry. This is for your own good. Cryptina turned and walked away as she was rubbing tears from her eyes. Alaric stood there in the cage watching her leave, feeling betrayed and frustrated while the children and Danny marched around the cage shouting, Vampire, 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 kill the vampire, repeating it over again. Cryptina entered the crowd. She could hear Abraham Van Helsing and saw him up on the stage. People! Abraham Van Helsing waved up across. I have heard your concern. Vampires attacked a flock of sheep. Vampires terrorizing our citizens a few nights ago. A vampire bat flying through our very streets. Behold! He held up a plaque. It had long fangs on it. At the bottom of it said, Ozel von Horrificus. Just then, the vampire hunters removed the curtains. Father! Alaric cried with tears falling from his eyes. Abraham Van Helsing put the plaque away. The people gasped with fear and surprise to see he had a large vampire bat locked in a cage. Mother! Alaric cried with fear. He has got a vampire, Danny said, standing there with his friends with shock. People, you have nothing to fear from this wicked demon. Now, open the gate, Abraham Van Helsing demanded. The people gasped again as Abraham Van Helsing smirked at the poor weak vampire as he took the chains from Chester. Alaric's mother hissed as Abraham Van Helsing pulled the chains more. Alaric's mother slowly got up out of the cage. She was annoyed and hungry by the looks of it. Cryptina watched her, feeling sorry for her. She really wanted to help her and Alaric both. But how? You see, Abraham Van Helsing held out his cross, aiming it towards Alaric's mother. She backed up with fear, quickly turning away from it. Her eyes began to water. Alaric watched as he began to grind his fangs. Mother, mother, mother! Then all of a sudden Alaric broke free from the cage, causing the whole thing to break into pieces as if a tiger was the one who broke the cage. Alaric quickly flew through the crowd of people as if it was like lightning was running through the crowd. Alaric! Cryptina cried, trying to grab him. Stay away from me! Alaric quickly rushed right by her like lightning. What the? Lydia lifted a brow. Lydia? Klaus turned her with worry. Wait, why is Alaric's mother on the stage? Klaus asked as he was drinking blood milk from his glass. Lydia stood there, narrowing her eyes, looking at Alaric's mother, trying to avoid him. Lydia? Klaus looked at her puzzled. Oh my stars! Cryptina's boyfriend has gone mad! Anastasia said, crossing her arms while Harold was still stuck in the pillory, trying to grab the cookie with his tongue lifting on the booth. Abraham Van Helsing was just about to continue, but before he could get the chance to, he felt someone holding the chains. He turned to see it was a little boy standing there in between of him and the vampire woman. His face was a light red color. His blood-glowing red eyes were narrowed, and he looked as if he just fought a whole pack of wolves. Let her go! He points. That's my mommy! He cried with tears running down his face. What's this? Abraham Van Helsing asked, still holding the chains, feeling confused. What's going on here? He asked again. Let her go! That's my mommy! Alaric points at his mother again. Good hunter, Abraham Van Helsing turned to Chester. Take care of this wicked thing. Alaric looked up at him, grinding his fangs as he saw Chester running towards him. Chester tried to grab him, but before he could, Alaric quickly leaped on top of his head and kicked him, causing his helmet to break. You go, Alaric! Klaus cried with joy, raising his fist in the air. Lydia glared at him, lifting a brow. The people began to laugh. Alaric leaped in front of his mother until his mother went around and stood in between of her son and Chester. They both hissed at him. Good hunter, can you not catch anything? What are you doing? Van Helsing cried, beginning to feel embarrassed as he watched the crowd laugh. Here! Van Helsing tossed a garlic necklace to Chester. Put this around his neck and throw him in the cage. Chester, no! Kryptina rushed towards him, trying to get onto the stage. Chester picked up the garlic necklace and turned towards her with worry. Kryptina, get away from here! He picked up Alaric as he tried to strike him. Alaric's mother kept on hissing and trying to grab Chester. Chester was just about to put the garlic necklace around his neck until suddenly Alaric's mother broke free from one of the chains. Just then, Alaric's mother bit Chester right on his shoulder, causing him to drop Alaric. Ah! Chester cried with pain. Alaric rushed away. Okay, Van Helsing turned to his vampire hunters. Put her back! Put her back! The vampire hunters began to pull the chains, causing Alaric's mother to back up into the cage. Alaric's mother snapped her jaws left and right, hissing with anger. Oh, no, you don't! Cover her mouth! Someone shouted. Alaric quickly leaped on top of the picture of Van Helsing, attacking a vampire who was wearing a long black hat, cape, fancy clothing, and a cane. Alaric tore the picture apart and he leaped on top of one of the vampire hunters' helmets as they tried to catch him. Come here, you! One of the vampire hunters cried. Just then the crowd gasped with fear and shock as Alaric suddenly transformed into a bat and he quickly flew up onto the wall. He then turned towards them with anger. I am a vampire, Alaric hissed, and he made fists with anger. I'm leading my vampires. I will get revenge for my father, and I'm coming back for my mother, and then we'll suck the blood out of you all. The crowd gasped with fear. Alaric hissed with anger again. He then transformed into a bat and stormed towards Shadow Forest. Why didn't you tell me? Klaus pulled Lydia into her house and into a quiet room. It wasn't my place to tell you. Lydia lifted her hands with anger. She lowered her hands. It just wasn't my place to tell you. She turned away, holding her hands together. And even after I loved you, when no one else did, Klaus stepped towards her as tears began to fall from his eyes. I even bought you a gift. He opened up one of his hands. It was a small red box with a white ribbon with a bow on it. But you didn't tell me that my best friend's mother was here, and now his father was killed by that monster. Lydia turned towards him with anger-making fists. Look, it wasn't my place to tell you. I don't belong to anyone. I can never be with anyone. I can never be with a weirdo. I can never be with a monster. Klaus's head popped up with hurt and disappointment. He felt like he was frozen to the ground. Fine. He turned away from her. If that's all you see me as, then I won't stick around here anymore. His eyes began to water and he wiped his tears as he slowly stepped towards the front door. Lydia was looking away from him with her arms crossed until she slowly turned to him, watching him leave. His eyes were looking at the ground. She turned away from him again. Klaus, I'm sorry. I have a confession too. She turned to see Klaus was nowhere in sight. The only thing left of Klaus was the small little red box he left for her. Lydia slowly looked back and forth. She picked up the little red box and she took off the white ribbon. Lydia's eyes almost leaped out of her head, and then she backed up as she covered her mouth as tears began to fall from her eyes as She opened the box to finally see what the item was. Then all of a sudden she felt strange, like a gust of wind was surrounding her. Prepare the garlic. Note to self, prepare the wooden stakes and crosses as well. Good hunter, what have you become? Abraham Van Helsing asked, stepping towards Chester and Kryptina. Prove yourself a worthy vampire hunter tonight, or tomorrow you'll be in chains as well. Van Helsing narrowed his eyes. Now put an end to that wicked demon. Van Helsing pointed at Alaric's mother. What cannot be tamed must be destroyed. He turned away from them. No, please, you can't. Kryptina stepped forward with tears running down her face. Everyone was already in enough pain. She didn't want to see anyone else get hurt. Kryptina! Chester quickly grabbed her before she could reach Van Helsing. Stop this, Chester demanded. Oh, for heaven's sake, put manners on that girl, or manners will be put on her. Van Helsing exited the stage, leaving Chester to deal with the vampire and Kryptina alone. Chester took out a wooden stake and set it on his bow. No, Chester, no, please, you can't. Kryptina rested her hands on his chest. Enough, Kryptina. Chester turned towards her. But you can't, Kryptina cried again. I said now, girl. Chester pointed and narrowed his eyes with anger. Kryptina slowly turned away, wiping the tears off her face. She didn't want to look at her brother. She wouldn't dare watch him murder Alaric's mother before her very eyes. She didn't dare look at him. All her life she was told what to do instead of thinking about what she wanted to do for herself. Alaric's mother watched her with sadness. Kryptina kept on walking away while Chester slowly aimed his bow at Alaric's mother. Chester was just about to shoot Alaric's mother, but before he could, he looked to see Kryptina was standing right in between them, stretching her arms out, protecting her. Kryptina turned away from Chester to unlock the cage. She was just about to unlock the cage until Chester grabbed her by the wrist and turned her to face him. Van Helsing will have us in chains! Chester kneeled down to her with worry, resting his hands on her shoulders. But why, Chester? Why? Kryptina asked. I'm afraid. I'm afraid that one day you will end up in a cage. Chester hugs her. But I'm already in a cage. Kryptina pushed him off her. They both looked at one another in silence until they heard crying in the distance. Vampire! Vampire! A person came rushing inside the city, ringing a bell. He looked as if he just saw a whole group of ghosts. All the people came rushing inside their homes. Some rushing inside locked their doors. Some of them had their wooden stakes and garlic ready, while others just ran under their beds to hide. Chester turned around with shock as he saw Kryptina and Alaric's mother holding hands. They both stood strong, looking at Shadow Forest. They both knew Alaric and the other vampires will be heading this way, and they knew they will have to stop them. Kryptina looked at her brother. I'm sorry, Chester. Kryptina and Alaric's mother both took off like lightning, still holding hands. Kryptina! Chester cried as he tripped on the ground, reaching out his hand, hoping Kryptina will stop this nonsense. What the? Abraham Van Helsing was dressed in his silver armor, his long purple cloak and long purple hat. He had his wooden stakes, his bow, his garlic, and his crosses packed in his bag. His eyes widened with shock as Kryptina and Alaric's mother came flying right by him. He quickly took out his small mirror, holding it towards Kryptina. He noticed there was no reflection of her at all. I knew it. He narrowed his eyes. Close the gate! The guards were about to close the gate, but before they could, Kryptina and Alaric's mother leaped on top of the gate together and rushed like lightning towards Shadow Forest. What's the meaning of this? Oxblood crossed his arms. Yeah, I thought Oxblood told us we weren't allowed to go to any human cities or villages, Thorn said with her arms crossed. It's time for us to attack those humans and suck all the blood out of them, Alaric said as he threw a branch at a tree, causing the branch to break. He's so angry, Duke whispered, leaning towards Thorn. All the vampires surrounded Alaric. Why? Thorn asked. They have our... Alaric stopped with surprise. All the vampires looked to see two shadows coming towards them. They noticed it was Kryptina and Alaric's mother walking towards them. A human? Oxblood said with surprise. Alaric! He turned towards Alaric with anger. Mother? Alaric and Thorn said. Mother! Alaric and Thorn ran towards her with excitement. Alaric and Thorn both hugged their mother with joy. Their mother hugged them back. Just then all the vampires joined in. Oh, Alaric, Thorn, I thought I'd never see you two again. Humans are not allowed in our territory. Oxblood stepped in between them. I shall throw your life. Alaric's mother stepped next to Oxblood until this one freed me. Yeah, cool it, Oxblood, Henderson suggested. For a former human, she's A-OK in my book. He waves his fist with excitement. Alaric's mother gave her a smile. Alaric turned away from her, crossing his arms with anger. Alaric? Kryptina stepped towards him. Look, I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to help. I'm so sorry. She reached out her hands to him. Alaric's mother smiled at Alaric. Alaric slowly turned towards Kryptina. Oh, come here to me, human girl. He grabbed her by the hands, and they began to twirl around together. You know, Thorn stepped towards her. The little vampire girl smiled at her. I didn't trust you at first, but you're one cool human. Duke steps in, looking at Kryptina, lifting a brow. Well, I never thought I'd say this to a human, but you're amazing, and if Alaric has to give his trust into anyone, I'm glad it was you. Duke smiled at her with pride. Klaus sat on a tree trunk, slouching, looking down at the ground. Grrr! Oxblood turned away from them, crossing his arms. I'm not a human anymore, Kryptina smiled at Alaric. You're right, you're not. You're a vampire. You're one of us now, Alaric giggled. But because I bit you, that makes me your master now. He giggled with a tease. And yet I still believed I saved my oh-so-great master's undead life from a vampire trap. She teased, flickering her eyes at him. All vampires smiled and hissed with joy until Alaric's mother felt something sharp hit her on her chest. She suddenly fell onto the ground. Ah! Alaric and Thorn cried. They both rushed towards their mother to see a wooden stake in her chest. No! Kryptina cried, resting her hands on her cheeks. Just then they heard calling in the distance. Kryptina and the vampires turned to see it was her brother running towards them. Kryptina, run! Chester was reaching out his hand to her. No, Chester! Kryptina began punching him with anger. You shot her! How could you? All the other vampires quickly surrounded them, hissing with anger. I'm so sick of you vampire hunters, Duke hissed with anger. Let's just kill them, Thorn suggested. They all began to rage with anger until they heard a loud voice. Enough! They all turned to see Alaric and followed him into Shadow Forest. Oxblood picked up Alaric's mother's body and carried her into the forest. He shot Kryptina an unkind glare. Let me go! Kryptina cried, trying to get Chester to let go. No, Kryptina, stay! Chester held her tighter. I have to help her! She's dying! Kryptina continued to try to get him back to her, to let her go. Let me go! Alaric! Alaric! Kryptina grabbed his arms, trying to get him off of her. No, Kryptina, why? I don't understand. Chester rested his hand on her cheek. Harold and Anastasia entered the front of the forest. Don't you see? I'm one of them. I'm a vampire. Kryptina punched Chester's chest. What? No, Kryptina, stay. I can't let you go. Chester wrapped his arms around her as if she was going to warn and leaving him. Chester. Kryptina wrapped her arms around him until she noticed there was a puddle next to them. Kryptina narrowed her eyes. She knew that it was time. She couldn't hide it forever, and she needed her brother and friends to know the truth. She knew they didn't believe a word she was saying, and she knew it was time for them to know the truth. Kryptina immediately pushed Chester right off of her, causing him to fall into the ground. Kryptina, wait! Chester got up, reaching out his hands to her. Kryptina slowly backed up towards the puddle. Their eyes almost leaped out of their heads once they realized the puddle had no reflection of her.